The Green Bay Packers just did the unthinkable. I absolutely love it. Brian Gutekunst goes out and he shocks the world. All Packer fans around are sitting there in wonder. And I think there was probably somebody else sitting there in wonder. And you got this, you got to love this Twitter post right here. It says Aaron Rodgers seeing a wide receiver drafted by the Packers in the first round. That's probably his reaction. He's like, come on, man, are you kidding me? Like, you've got to be kidding me. So here's the thing about Matthew Golden. I really like the pick. Okay. So I said going into the draft that, man, Matthew Golden would be a great fit in Green Bay just because he can create that separation. Sure, does he lack in size and all of that stuff? But here's the thing. You look at Matthew Golden's relative athletic score here. He rates poor as far as his size. He can't do anything about his size, but he is elite when it comes to his speed. As you can see, all the categories there. He's an elite separator out there. Okay, so just how elite is he when it comes to creating separation because he doesn't have size, on his side? Let's take a look at some highlights here that Bleacher Report put out. Let's check this out here. So you've got great route running ability. I really, really like this pick for the Green Bay Packers. He's going to join a crowded wide receiver room. Now, what they do with Romeo Dobbs remains to be seen, but you can see he's capable of going and getting out just one-handed grabs, great separation from him and the defender. You look at this, check out this jump ball. Okay, so lacks size, but he times his jumps properly. Okay, so that's something that we can take a look at what Christian Watson is or isn't. Okay, so he was supposed to be that wide receiver that the Green Bay Packers were going to rely on to go out there, be a deep ball threat. Christian Watson, unfortunately, hasn't just been able to stay healthy, but not just that. I don't think he times. He just seems off on his timing when it comes to, just jump ball ability and between him and the defender. So I really like the potential that the Packers have in Matthew Golden. Could he be a number one wide receiver prospect? Absolutely. That's why the Packers went and they took him in the first round. They didn't go out and make a splash this off season in free agency when it comes to wide receivers, but they do make a splash and go and get a guy like Matthew Golden in the first round. I actually was shocked. I thought the Packers were going to trade back. Was Matthew Golden going to be available if they were to trade back, say with the Philadelphia Eagles, who then ended up swapping spots with the Kansas City Chiefs? Now it says right here, and this is on the Eagles website. It says Eagles talked to the Packers about trading up to the 23rd pick. So the Packers, I know, would have entertained trading back, and that was something that I thought Gutekunst would have done. I was actually pretty sure that he was going to be trading back into the draft. So by trading to the 31st or 32nd pick in the NFL or draft, so would Matthew Golden have been available? One thing we do know is that Will Johnson would have been available, and Will Johnson is still available out there. And keep in mind, when we start talking about today in day two, the Tennessee Titans, they select early in the second round. That is certainly a team that has made it very vocal. They're willing to part ways with that draft pick, build on some more draft capital. Could you see the Packers doing something like that? I don't think so, because here to go get Will Johnson, unless they're absolutely in love with him, because when you take a look at Will Johnson and his capabilities, he's certainly a great lockdown defender. I think it just depends on what their long-term plans are for Jair Alexander. One thing we do know that it'd be great to get a corner drafted earlier, sooner than later, and I think they can get that accomplished in the second or third round by staying where they're at and still get an absolute stud. But going back to the Matthew Golden pick, okay, so for the Packers, you talk. So here's PFF. PFF put out their rankings of whether they feel the best wide receivers are in the draft. You have McMillan out of Arizona, of course, the number one slotted wide receiver out there. I did see a couple of articles out there that actually had Matthew Golden slated as the number one wide receiver in this year's draft, and he certainly has that potential. He's got a very high ceiling. Then you got Luther Burden, who still is not drafted out of Missouri. On PFF, they had him as the number 2 wide receiver coming into the 2025 draft. Then you have Emeka Egbuka being selected by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A really good move by Tampa Bay because their wide receivers are getting older there, and you got a talent like Emeka Egbuka, who I think is a going to be a really good wide receiver. He's a stud. But the Packers, based on just his style, I don't think the Packers necessarily. I would have loved him in Green Bay. Uh, but he gets selected earlier. The Packers go with Matthew Golden, and that is a wide receiver. Now, here's the only thing on this PFF. It says make him a player who could be a high-end number 2 wide receiver in the league, and that's certainly what the Packers are not looking to do. They've got a lot of number 2 wide receivers in the league, but keep in mind that's just this article here. So Packers again making some history here by selecting and you got to love the crowd that was chanting "Go Pack, go! Go Pack, go!" Uh, Record-breaking crowd out there. I mean that looked absolutely amazing. I'm super pumped about this pick. I want you guys to let me know your thoughts about the selection that Brian Gutekunst goes and wows. So when you look at the first round of this year's draft, I was shocked. When you're looking at the NFC North, you've got the Chicago Bears selecting the tight end out of Michigan, and I thought, he wasn't the best tight end in this draft. So I couldn't have been happier with the way this all shook out and the way that the Chicago Bears, I think, flopped on that pick. Now, is he going to be a productive tight end in the league? Absolutely. I think he has the potential to be that. But I think the Bears missed an opportunity to grab the best player available. So as a Packer fan, you couldn't be happier to watch the Bears do what they did. And then you got the Minnesota Vikings selecting a guard. I didn't think in this year's draft I thought there was only one guard capable of going in the first round. There ends up being 3 guards selected overall in this first round, which only helps the Packers in the second round because there's going to be more and more players dropping into the second round that the Packers have the ability and capability to trade up. Okay, then you have the Detroit Lions. By the time the Packers picked, I thought the Packers were going to go defensive tackle until you started seeing all the defensive tackles off the board. And then it didn't make sense for the Packers to select a defensive tackle. I thought, okay, at this point in time, you're going to either have to go cornerback or you're going to have to go wide receiver. They go wide receiver. The Detroit Lions select a defensive tackle, which I wanted him in Green Bay, but in the second round. So the Lions, I think, did what the Packers did last year. They took Jordan Morgan early, and I think the Lions did the same thing with this defensive tackle. They took him early. I want you guys to leave your comments. I'm super pumped. And as always, go Pack, go. Looking forward to today's draft.